Hi guys, welcome to the tutorial. This is our final main tutorial and we'll do a quick sum up in the next one, but in terms of new content, this is the last one. And we're looking at functional English for online leadership. So some key phrases that we can use in order to manage our hybrid and remote teams. So again, this thing about language precision is something I've come back to all the way through the course, and it is especially important when you're working with an online or hybrid team. Remote leaders, more than any other leaders, must use clear and exact language to compensate for the absence of body language and face-to-face cues in virtual settings. Some common challenges we face for online management and meetings. Online meetings often fail due to unclear goals, poor structure, mix of communication styles, and that confuse participants. They can also fail when your internet doesn't work, your microphone doesn't work, when the platform doesn't work. In terms of content, it can be due to unclear goals, poor structure, and a mix of communication styles. So effective phrasing is really important, more important here than ever. Use purposeful phrasing to help maintain team focus, accountability, and engagement, driving productive and aligned discussions. So for example, the phrase, let's clarify what success looks like today. So basically it's a way of saying, okay, this meeting, this is going to be the topic and this is what we're going to try to achieve. So just like if you were teaching a class, you would tell the people in that class, okay, today, guys, we're going to be learning this. So you want to do that in your virtual meetings with your staff. This is what we're going to do, and this is how things are going to look if it goes well. Very important to set these expectations either before the meeting or right at the beginning of the meeting. So first of all, the meeting needs a purpose. It needs to have a clear and obvious purpose. So you can start with a phrase like, the purpose of today's meeting is to clearly state the meeting's goal and focus participants' attention from the outset. Generally speaking, people don't want to come to meetings. So if you're going to make them come to a meeting, and this goes for a virtual meeting and also face-to-face meeting, they're going to want to know why they're there and also why this couldn't have been an email as opposed to a meeting. So clear purpose. Also clear outcomes. Use statements such as, by the end of this call, we should have decided on whatever it is that you're aiming to decide on in that meeting. Manage time efficiently, respect people's time. Guide time management with phrases like, let's aim to keep each update under 2 minutes. Polite but firm language. Again, the modals like should and aim to communicate expectations politely yet firmly, promoting cooperation and respect. So what's our structure going to look like overall? So you're going to have a greeting and a check-in at the beginning of your virtual meeting. Start the meeting by warmly welcoming participants and briefly checking in to create a comfortable atmosphere and build rapport. So be a welcome message, a brief personal check-in where possible to set a positive tone and get people relaxed and comfortable. The purpose and the agenda. Clearly state the meeting's purpose and outline the agenda to ensure everyone understands the goals and flow of the session. Round of updates and discussions. Invite each participant to share updates or contribute to discussions, keeping the focus on relevant points to maintain engagement and clarity. Decisions and next steps. Summarize key decisions made, agree on action points, and assign responsibilities to ensure accountability and clear follow-up. And then summary and close. Recap the main outcomes, confirm understanding, thank participants, and formally close the meeting on a positive note. This would be your ideal step-by-step structure for a virtual meeting and for a face-to-face meeting as well, as a matter of fact. Managing participation and engagement is generally more tricky in a virtual meeting than in a meeting where everyone's in the same physical space. You're usually going to have to call out people individually. Not usually, but there's a higher chance, let's say, of having to call out people individually rather than them volunteering an answer. So use polite and inviting phrases like, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, or let's get around the team. What's your view, Anna? To encourage everyone's participation. You may be interrupted, just as in a real meeting, so you have to handle it politely. Manage interruptions gracefully by acknowledging speakers and suggesting turn taking. For example, let's let Maria finish her point and then we'll come back to you. Tone for smooth flow. Maintain a calm voice and neutral phrasing to keep the meeting flow steady and avoid tension when navigating contributions and interruptions. Clarifying and confirming understanding, very important again, even more so in a virtual meeting than a face-to-face meeting. Miscommunication is common online for various reasons. Maybe the signal's going to drop, maybe the audio is not great, maybe body language isn't clear, maybe facial expressions aren't clear, and there can be lots of reasons for miscommunication online. So you want to make sure that you have effective verification phrases. Just to confirm, you mean we'll deliver by next Friday, right? Let me check that I understood correctly. Can we agree on this timeline? So anytime you have a doubt, it's fine to ask questions, to clarify. It shows active listening, which is never a bad thing. This is true of all business group interactions, but it's more likely to occur in the online context. Leadership tip for clarity: incorporate words like confirm, clarify, and agree, in your language to signal clear leadership, build trust, and prevent confusion in virtual teams. Key phrases to guide meetings. Phrases such as, "That's a great point. Let's note it and revisit it later." To acknowledge contributions while keeping the agenda on track. So maybe someone has something they want to talk about, and it's a fair question or an interesting point and very pertinent, but it's just not for right now. So you acknowledge it and say, "We'll come back to it later." And then you have to come back to it later. Time management language. In the interest of time, let's move forward. So again, the person could be saying something completely fair and relevant and true and important. You have to manage your time. Politeness with softeners. Incorporate softeners such as could and let's. We've seen those before to remain courteous while asserting control, and encourage brief, focused comments. Say, "Okay, thank you very much for your contribution. Let's move on." Or, "Could we wrap up there?" Or, "David, could you tell us what you think of that proposal?" So again, this is hedging conditional language. Closing meetings, again, just as in a face-to-face meeting. Virtual meetings also need to be tactfully closed. You can't just switch off the meeting. Use clear phrases like, "To summarize, our next steps are," to signal a recap. And make sure you end on a positive note. Thank participants for their input and contributions, reinforcing a positive atmosphere, and encourage ongoing engagement. Reinforce one big clear takeaway. More if you have to, but there'll usually be something in a meeting, one thing more than any other thing, that you want to make sure your staff go away with. So think about what that is, reinforce it, and send follow-ups as well. Commit to sending a follow-up email outlining the meeting's key decisions and next steps to maintain clarity and accountability, because you may well have had people in the meeting, especially if it was quite a big meeting with many participants. You may have people who didn't fully grasp everything, but they didn't feel very comfortable during the meeting, or they weren't, for whatever reason, they weren't able to communicate during the meeting that they were not quite understanding some of the information. So it's very important, very useful to send a written follow-up. Common communication pitfalls. The phrase "any questions" will typically be met with about 90% of people not asking questions. More assertive members of the group will, but it'd be better to phrase it like, "Before we finish, what questions do you have?" So this is me assuming that if I say this is me assuming that there are questions. I already know there are questions. There must be questions. Of course there are questions. So what are your questions? Any questions is more like, well, there might be questions, but there's also no particular reason for there to be questions. So if you phrase it, "Before we finish, what questions do you have?" If you phrase it that way, it's more encouraging. People are more likely to ask. Rather than saying something vague like, "We'll see how it goes," say something more specific like, "Let's review progress in our next meeting." It's more accountable. It makes time bound. So yeah, "we'll see how it goes" is very vague. Who is we, and when are you going to see, and what are you going to be looking at? So you want something more specific than that. You very often hear in a meeting, "Sorry, I think you're on mute." It's just a bit, and it's not a terrible phrase, but it's just a bit polite to say, "We can't hear you right now. Maybe check your mic." And then the person might probably work out that they are still on mute. But if you say, "I think you're on mute," I think maybe there's that impression that you're maybe implying that person is not the most intelligent person because they forgot to switch on the microphone. Whereas you can maybe blame the technology to be a bit more polite. "So we can't hear you right now. Maybe it's your microphone, but maybe it's not." So summing it all up as we come to the end of the topic and come to the end of the course, in fact. Setting clear expectations before meetings improves productivity and focus. That's true of all meetings, but is especially important online. Use structured language to maintain control, clarity, and a professional tone. Always confirm understanding to avoid miscommunication and keep the team aligned. Miscommunication is more likely to occur in a virtual meeting than in a face-to-face meeting or physical meeting. End meetings with clear actions and summaries to ensure follow-through, and also make sure you do a written follow-up. And something you could try if you have the opportunity is to record a 2 or 3 minute virtual meeting using today's language, starting with an agenda, managing time politely, closing with a clear summary. If that's not viable for you, next time you are in a virtual meeting or even a regular meeting, pay attention to whether the meeting host or coordinator does these things. How do they begin the meeting? Do they set out the agenda? Do they do it clearly? Do they check effectively that everyone's on board, everyone understands? How do they deal with problems or issues? How do they end the meeting? Are they going through these steps that we would consider to be very important for any meeting, but especially a virtual meeting? Thanks very much, guys. Hope you enjoyed the course until this point. We'll have a very brief summary in the next tutorial, but for the most part, we've covered everything that we need to cover. Hope you took a lot from it. I'll see you for a very brief sum up in the next tutorial. Bye.